The 1970s broke cinema. Directors threw out the rulebook and made horror films so raw, so bizarre, and so visually deranged that studios tried to bury them. One film on this list was made for less than the cost of a used car. Another was banned in multiple countries for decades. These 5 movies rewrote what fear could look like on screen. Ready to lose some sleep? Number 5. Phantasm, 1979. Don Coscarelli was 23 years old when he made Phantasm, and that youthful energy bleeds from every frame of this completely insane, totally original, genuinely unforgettable horror experience. Nothing about Phantasm should work. The plot barely holds together. The mythology makes no sense. The acting ranges from earnest to embarrassing. And yet, somehow this film has haunted audiences for over 4 decades and launched a franchise spanning 5 films. How does something this weird become this beloved? The story follows a teenage boy named Mike, who becomes convinced that the local mortician, known only as the Tall Man, is doing something terrible with the bodies at his funeral home. Mike is right, of course, but the truth is far stranger than simple grave robbing. The Tall Man is an interdimensional being harvesting corpses to transform into dwarf slaves for another world. He protects his operation with flying silver spheres that drill into victims' skulls and drain their blood. If you think that sounds absolutely bonkers, you are correct. Coscarelli invented a completely original mythology from scratch and committed to it completely. Angus Scrimm, as the Tall Man, delivers one of the great horror villain performances of all time. His impossibly tall frame, cadaverous face, and booming voice transform a funeral director into something genuinely otherworldly. Scrimm was a classically trained actor who brought dignity and menace to a role that could have easily become camp. When he intones his famous line about fear, audiences believe he means it. The character became iconic immediately, spawning merchandise, sequels, and endless imitation. The silver spheres deserve their own paragraph. These flying death machines rank among the most creative kills in horror history. Watching one deploy its blades and attach to a victim's forehead remains genuinely shocking, and Coscarelli achieved the effect with fishing line, compressed air, and relentless experimentation. The practical effects throughout Phantasm demonstrate what determination can accomplish without studio budgets. Every dollar appears on screen, stretched further than seemed possible through sheer inventiveness. Coscarelli shot Phantasm over multiple years whenever funding became available, using his family home and local cemeteries as locations. This guerrilla approach gives the film a dreamlike quality that studio productions cannot replicate. Scenes blend into each other with nightmare logic, time becomes elastic, and reality itself seems unstable. Whether intentional or not, the fragmented production schedule created an aesthetic perfectly suited to horror. The relationship between Mike and his older brother Jody provides emotional grounding amid the chaos. These feel like real siblings, complete with affection, frustration, and mutual protection. Their dynamic prevents Phantasm from becoming purely a special effects showcase and gives audiences something to care about beyond mere survival. When the stakes become personal, the horror intensifies. Critics at the time were baffled by Phantasm, unsure how to categorize something that combines science fiction, horror, and coming-of-age drama while following no established template. The film found its audience through midnight screenings and word of mouth, building a cult following that studios eventually noticed. 4 sequels followed, with Coscarelli maintaining creative control throughout, a rarity in franchise horror. The ending of Phantasm remains one of the most discussed conclusions in horror history. Without revealing specifics, Coscarelli pulls the rug out from under audiences multiple times in the final minutes, questioning everything they have witnessed. Some viewers find this frustrating. Others consider it the perfect cap on a film that never played by conventional rules. Either way, you will not forget it. Number 4, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Here it is, The One. The film that changed everything and made studio executives lose sleep, wondering what else was happening outside their carefully controlled system. Tobe Hooper made The Texas Chainsaw Massacre for approximately $80,000 in the brutal Texas summer heat. And the result is quite simply one of the most important and influential horror films ever created. Nothing before it looks like this. Nothing after it has matched its raw power. This is horror stripped down to bone and sinew, relentless and unforgiving and absolutely unforgettable. The setup is deliberately simple. 5 young people traveling through rural Texas encounter a family of cannibals. That is it. Hooper and co-writer Kim Henkel built their entire film on that foundation, trusting that execution would elevate premise. They were correct beyond anyone's expectations. What happens to these characters over 90 minutes feels less like a movie and more like a document of something that should never have been filmed. Leatherface became an instant icon. This hulking figure wearing a mask of human skin and wielding a chainsaw with equal parts fury and desperation represents something new in horror. The villain who is also victim, the monster created by circumstances beyond his control. Gunnar Hansen brought physical presence and strange pathos to the role, making Leatherface terrifying and pitiful simultaneously. He remains the template for countless slashers who followed, though none capture his specific mixture of menace and vulnerability. The dinner scene ranks among the most disturbing sequences in cinema history. Hooper keeps his camera on actress Marilyn Burns as her character endures psychological torture at the hands of the cannibal family. Burns was actually exhausted, actually terrified, actually pushed beyond normal limits of film production. Her screams are genuine. Her breakdown is real. The line between performance and authentic suffering becomes impossible to locate. This is horror achieved through something approaching actual trauma. Despite its reputation, Texas Chainsaw Massacre contains almost no on-screen gore. Hooper creates the impression of extreme violence through editing, sound design, and implication while showing remarkably little. The MPAA still gave the film an X rating, which Hooper successfully appealed. He proved that suggestion creates more powerful reactions than explicit imagery, a lesson most modern horror filmmakers have forgotten entirely. The production conditions became legendary. Cast and crew worked 16-hour days in 100-degree temperatures, wearing the same unwashed costumes throughout filming. The smell on set became unbearable. Tempers flared constantly. Equipment failed repeatedly. By all accounts, making the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was miserable for everyone involved. But that misery translates directly to screen. The film feels like everyone involved was slightly losing their minds, and that authenticity cannot be manufactured in the comfortable conditions. John Larroquette provided the opening narration, presenting the events as a true crime document. This technique, combined with grainy cinematography and natural lighting, convinced many viewers they were watching something actually recovered from crime scenes. Hooper anticipated found footage horror by decades, understanding that presentation affects perception. The film feels dangerous in ways that polished productions cannot achieve. Major studios refused to distribute the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, forcing Bryanston Distributing to release it. The film was banned in multiple countries and remained unavailable in uncut form in several regions for years. This notoriety only increased its legend, making it essential viewing for horror fans who sought out bootleg copies and festival screenings. By the time proper home video releases became available, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre had already achieved mythic status. The impact on horror cannot be overstated. Every slasher, every backwoods horror film, every family of killers owes direct debt to what Hooper created. Directors from Wes Craven to Ridley Scott have cited the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as formative influence. The film proved that horror could achieve artistic legitimacy while remaining genuinely terrifying, that low budgets could produce great art, and that independent filmmakers could change entire genres overnight. Final shot of Leatherface swinging his chainsaw in frustration as dawn breaks remains one of cinema's most powerful images. Hooper holds on this moment far longer than expected, letting audiences sit with the exhaustion and madness of everything they have witnessed. There is no relief in survival. There is only escape from one nightmare into the larger nightmare of continuing to live. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre understands that horror does not end with credits. Number 3, Tourist Trap, 1979. You think mannequins are creepy now? Wait until you see what director David Schmeller did with them back in 1979. Tourist Trap is one of the most underrated and genuinely unhinged horror films of the entire decade, and the fact that it carries a PG rating makes it even more disturbing. This movie proves you do not need buckets of blood to crawl under your audience's skin and stay there for weeks. The premise sounds simple enough. A group of young friends breaks down near a remote roadside attraction filled with mannequins and wax figures. They meet a seemingly friendly older man named Mr. Slauson, played by the legendary Chuck Connors, who warns them about his brother living nearby. What follows is a descent into pure nightmare logic that most viewers never see coming. The killer wears masks made from plaster, telekinetically controls the mannequins, and creates a soundscape of screaming voices that feels ripped from a fever dream. Schmoller crafted something genuinely original here, blending slasher conventions with supernatural elements and psychological terror in ways that nobody was doing at the time. Chuck Connors delivers one of the most committed performances in horror history. This was a man known for wholesome television roles, and watching him transform into something deeply unsettling is half the fun. He plays multiple characters throughout the film, and his ability to shift between warmth and menace keeps you constantly off balance. Critics at the time dismissed Tourist Trap as cheap exploitation, but they missed what Schmoller was actually doing. He was making a film about isolation, obsession, and the thin line between preserving the past and being consumed by it. The mannequin sequences remain some of the most effective scare set pieces of the era. Schmoller uses slow camera movements and unsettling close-ups to make you question which figures are real and which are plastic. The production design feels like a collaboration between a carnival barker and a lunatic, with every corner of the roadside museum hiding something wrong. Pino Donaggio, who composed the iconic score for Carrie, provides a musical backdrop that swings between playful and absolutely terrifying without warning. What truly sets Tourist Trap apart is its commitment to atmosphere over explanation. The film never fully explains the telekinetic powers or the exact nature of the villain's madness. It trusts the audience to feel the dread without demanding logic. This approach frustrated some viewers in 1979, but has aged remarkably well. Modern audiences raised on films that explain every detail find Tourist Trap refreshingly nightmarish precisely because it refuses to hold your hand. Stephen King himself praised this film, calling it one of the scariest movies he had ever seen. When the master of horror singles out your low-budget mannequin movie, you know you did something right. Tourist Trap made money on its tiny budget and developed a cult following through late-night television, broadcasts, and video rentals. Today, it stands as essential viewing for anyone who wants to understand how far creativity can stretch when resources are limited. The final act of Tourist Trap remains genuinely shocking, even by contemporary standards. Without spoiling specifics, the imagery of masks, screaming faces, and the blurring of identity between human and object delivers a conclusion that haunts long after the credits roll. This is a film that understands horror is not about showing everything, but about making you terrified of what you might see next. Number 2. Alice, Sweet Alice, 1976. Before there was a slasher formula, there was Alice, Sweet Alice. This vicious little gem from director Alfred Sole predates Halloween by 2 years and establishes visual language that the entire subgenre would later borrow without acknowledgement. Shot in New Jersey for practically nothing, this film delivers religious terror, family dysfunction, and a killer in a translucent yellow raincoat and cherubic mask that still makes viewers uncomfortable nearly 5 decades later. The story centers on 2 sisters in a devoutly Catholic family. The younger daughter, Karen, is clearly the favorite, while her older sister Alice is strange, jealous, and possibly dangerous. When Karen is murdered at her own first communion ceremony, suspicion falls immediately on Alice. But director Sole keeps twisting the knife, adding more victims and more suspects until the truth becomes something far uglier than simple sibling rivalry. The film functions as both slasher and mystery, rewarding viewers who pay attention to small details planted throughout. What makes Alice, Sweet Alice remarkable is its willingness to implicate everyone. The Catholic Church, the family structure, the neighborhood itself, all become suspects in a broader indictment of how communities create monsters. Sole was raised Catholic and brings genuine knowledge to his critique, filling the film with authentic religious imagery and rituals that feel both beautiful and suffocating. The communion sequences are shot with the same reverence as genuine religious films, which makes the violence erupting within them even more transgressive. The killer design deserves special recognition. That translucent mask distorts the face beneath just enough to suggest something human without confirming it. The yellow raincoat became iconic, inspiring countless imitators and establishing the visual template of the slasher figure as simultaneously anonymous and distinctive. Every time the mask appears in doorways or descending staircases, the film generates pure dread through composition alone. Paula Shepherd delivers a genuinely disturbing performance as Alice. She was 19 years old playing 12, and her angular features and unsettling presence make every scene crackle with ambiguity. Is Alice a victim of circumstance and family neglect? Or is she exactly what everyone fears? Shepard keeps the question open throughout, never playing for sympathy or villainy, but occupying uncomfortable territory between both. The film also features Brooke Shields in her first major role, appearing briefly as the doomed younger sister. Her presence in marketing materials later helped Sweet Alice, find wider audiences after her career exploded. But this is not her film. This belongs to Shepard, to Soul, and to the deeply uncomfortable vision they created together. Critics initially dismissed Sweet Alice, as exploitation, but retrospective assessments have recognized its intelligence and craft. The film constructs elaborate suspense sequences that Hitchcock would have admired, particularly a terrifying scene in a stairwell involving the killer and a suspicious landlord. Soul understands that anticipation creates fear more effectively than surprise, and he builds these sequences with patient precision before unleashing violence. The religious themes give Sweet Alice, a depth missing from most slashers. Questions about innocence, guilt, confession, and redemption run throughout, turning a murder mystery into something approaching theological horror. The ending refuses easy resolution, leaving viewers with troubling questions about punishment and forgiveness that the film has no intention of answering. Today, Sweet Alice stands as essential viewing for understanding how the slasher genre developed. It predates the rules by establishing them, and its willingness to confront family dysfunction and religious hypocrisy gives it thematic weight that most later imitators lack entirely. Number 1. Suspiria, 1977. Dario Argento made a lot of horror films. Some are great, some are terrible, most are interesting. But Suspiria exists on an entirely different level. This is not simply a horror movie. This is a feature-length fever dream, a neon nightmare, a sustained assault on the senses that redefined what horror cinema could look like. From the opening frames to the devastating conclusion, Suspiria operates on pure visual logic, and arguing with its methodology is pointless. You either surrender to Argento's vision, or you leave confused. There is no middle ground. The plot concerns an American ballet student named Susie Banyan, who arrives at a prestigious German dance academy. On her first night, another student is murdered in one of the most elaborate and grotesque death sequences ever filmed. Susie begins investigating and discovers the school conceals something ancient and evil, but Argento cares less about the mystery than about creating overwhelming atmosphere. Every scene drips with color, shadow, and sound, designed to bypass rational thought and trigger primal terror. The color palette of Suspiria deserves museum exhibitions. Argento and cinematographer Luciano Tovoli used the last remaining stock of Technicolor film to achieve saturation impossible with modern processes. Reds look like bleeding wounds. Blues suggest suffocating depths. Greens carry poison in their very presence on screen. No film before or since looks like Suspiria because the technology to replicate it no longer exists. Argento understood he was working with a dying medium and pushed it further than anyone thought possible. Goblin provides the score, and their work here ranks among the greatest horror soundtracks ever recorded. The main theme uses music boxes, chanting voices, and progressive rock instrumentation to create something simultaneously childlike and threatening. Argento played this music at maximum volume on set during filming, forcing his actors to experience the same disorientation audiences would later feel. The technique was controversial, but undeniably effective. The set design transforms every location into something wrong. Doorknobs are placed too high. Corridors stretch beyond normal proportions. Architecture follows no logical rules. Production designer Giuseppe Bassan created spaces that feel hostile to human presence, buildings that seem to breathe and watch and wait. Suspiria turns the academy itself into the primary threat, with the coven of witches almost secondary to the environment they inhabit. Jessica Harper as Susie brings vulnerability and determination that prevents the visual assault from becoming exhausting. Her reactions to the horror surrounding her feel genuine, and her investigation provides just enough narrative structure to carry viewers through sequences that might otherwise overwhelm. Harper understood she was part of something unusual and committed fully to Argento's approach. The death sequences in Suspiria remain among the most creative and disturbing in horror history. Argento stages each murder as a set piece, building tension through editing and sound before unleashing violence that feels both beautiful and terrible. One sequence involving a room filled with razor wire became so iconic that horror filmmakers have been referencing it ever since. These are not simple kills, but elaborate rituals of destruction. Suspiria was controversial upon release, with some critics dismissing it as style over substance, while others recognized its radical approach to horror filmmaking. Time has been kind to the film. Contemporary assessments correctly identify Suspiria as a masterpiece that prioritizes atmosphere and visual storytelling over conventional narrative. Luca Guadagnino's 2018 remake, while excellent on its own terms, only confirmed how impossible it is to replicate what Argento achieved. The ending of Suspiria delivers confrontation with the ultimate evil in imagery that has never stopped being disturbing. Argento reveals the witch controlling the academy in makeup effects that blur the line between human and demon, creating a final antagonist that feels genuinely supernatural. The resolution provides catharsis while leaving questions about what Susie experienced and whether she will ever fully escape. Those are 5 horror films from the 1970s that pushed boundaries most modern filmmakers would never approach. Each one took risks that studios today would never approve and created images that remain burned into cinema history forever. But here's my question for you. Which decade actually produced the most innovative horror? Drop your answer in the comments and defend it. And be honest, which of these 5 genuinely scared you? If you say none, you are either lying or you need to watch them alone, in the dark, with headphones. Subscribe for more deep dives into cinema that refuses to play it safe.